Welcome to the next chapter of Mina Star, a near-future epic about humanity's reckoning after the collapse of the insane logic of mutually assured destruction, tracing how the ruins of the nation-state order give rise to the Charter, a new consensus-driven civilization built on the principle that every life is sovereign. In this chapter, we follow Chih-Wei Lin, Mikhail Mirov's feared yet beloved protégé and chief operative, as she tries to turn proof of his heir's secret into leverage before Mirov Enterprises' internal power struggle consumes her. Each board member wields power on a global scale, but Isidora Ibáñez's grievance, rooted in the belief that nuclear powers have terrorized the world with impunity, now threatens to transform a project built in the name of justice into something that could imperil everyone. Meanwhile, Ronald José Barreto, Chih-Wei's fiercely loyal head of security, must somehow keep her alive as the conflict around her turns openly violent. Chapter 10. Private Airport near Iquique, Chile, 2046. Chih-Wei thought about Mikhail's message. Meet Isidora. She is waiting in her conference room. Someone always tells the Emperor, Chih-Wei thought to herself. As she stepped from her executive pod, her compactly built security chief, Ronald José Barreto, extended a hand and guided her onto the tarmac. As they passed, he leaned in just enough to whisper, "They look like accountants, but I recognize some of Isidora Ibáñez's security staff. Be careful." Chih-Wei approached Isidora's greeting party and paused to take in the view from the top of the plateau, the Pacific stretching across the horizon. She extended her hand to clasp Isidora's chief of staff, Luis Choque, an extremely tall man with thick, untrimmed hair along his arms and neck. He smiled warmly and said, "Welcome to Iquique. Your audit team is already here, led by the industrious Ms. Madsen." A shadow passed across Luis's warm expression as he asked, "The audit is particularly thorough this year. All previous audit findings have been implemented, and no material weaknesses have ever been found. The team is particularly eager to understand how they can be helpful." Chih-Wei's smile never reached her eyes as she registered the slight uniform bulk beneath each jacket in the welcoming line. "You wouldn't be wearing armor if you thought this conversation mattered," she thought to herself. "Luis, I could never get any work done with that gorgeous view," she said, glancing past him toward the Pacific. "Thank you for the transportation, but Ronald and I know the way." They swung onto their motorcycles once they were set up. Riding near top speed toward Isidora's complex, Chih-Wei heard the chime signaling connection to her team's private mesh network. Madsen's voice cut in immediately. "Dragon Mother, we have the proof." Ron coughed sharply over the open channel, signaling his disapproval of the nickname. "Kachapa Ron, calm down," Madsen said. "Chih-Wei actually likes being called Dragon Mother. Ever since Jasmine's betrayal in Singapore, Freya Madsen had not been the same." Chih-Wei appreciated the greater skepticism, but she missed the strict and rule-abiding Ms. Madsen, who never would have said it to her face. Chih-Wei took a deep breath, then exhaled and steadied her racing heart. "Change of plans. I am joining Isidora in her conference room, and Mikhail will be joining remotely." Freya started, "She will keep," then stopped herself. After regaining composure, she said, "Go to the roof. The Suwalki option is on the roof." "I have to ask Freya about her name for the emergency exit option," Chih-Wei thought to herself. She saw Ron stiffen as his motorcycle leaned into a curve, and he voiced what she was already thinking. "Too many people involved. Someone always informs the Emperor. Do we have what we need for the trial?" Chih-Wei waited a moment before asking, "Freya, why did Jasmine send us here?" Freya answered soberly, "Jasmine sent us a ledger with the real number of kinetic rods provided by an extremist charter-aligned faction that murdered one of Ben Azimat's secret scientists for it." Freya paused, choosing her words carefully. "But to prove the existence of the secret fourth wave that Mikhail did not control, we needed corroborating evidence. She pointed us to the same compromised infrastructure from Singapore and Zofri." She continued, explaining how the records trace the inventory of ablative ceramic shielding, hidden inside Zofri's sprawling warehouses. Chih-Wei allowed a brief and unguarded feral smile to touch her face. It might be just enough to remove him as heir and save my life, she thought to herself. Freya Madsen, wearing jeans and a leather jacket, hugged Chih-Wei as she approached Isidora's compound. Freya handed her a hot coffee, winked, and said, "Be careful, the coffee is hot. I put 2 sugars and no milk, just how you like it." Chih-Wei took the cup and considered Freya's coded message. The situation could go kinetic at any moment, but Freya believed they held the advantage. Chih-Wei nodded to the team and said, "Freya, let's pack up the audit team. Have about half wait in the lobby and the other half shuttle the material out. And make sure the pilot knows to keep the engines hot." Chih-Wei held Ron's gaze just long enough to make sure he understood the subtext, then nodded once. "Let's not keep Isidora waiting." Isidora's conference room was indistinguishable from any other multinational boardroom, except for the woman seated at the head of the table beside a conference phone, with its red indicator light glowing. Everyone knew who was on the other end of the line. Isidora sat composed, her dark hair pulled tight, her sharp European-leaning features set in calm appraisal, with sun-worn skin and scarred hands that spoke to years in the field rather than behind a desk. As Chih-Wei and Ron entered, Isidora's security detail wordlessly indicated where they should sit. "So you discovered Alex's dirty little secret." Her face remained impassive, but her even voice carried an undercurrent of tension. Chih-Wei remained standing and said, "It is yours as well." Without responding to the accusation, Isidora smiled mirthlessly and said, "Staff, even powerful staff, should remember that their authority only comes from the one who sent them. But Mikhail did not send you, so what exactly are you doing here?" Chih-Wei stepped toward Isidora, then stopped as the security team visibly tensed in response. "My mandate from Mikhail is very broad. Remember, he offered me a board seat before you because my empire was and remains greater than your Continental Industrial Holdings S.A. What I do not understand is why you are standing against Mikhail by hiding Alexander's fourth wave." Isidora held Chih-Wei's gaze for a long moment before saying, "You have your father's eyes." Chih-Wei was genuinely surprised by the implication that Isidora had known her father. "You might want to reconsider standing," Isidora continued, "because it will take some time to learn whether Miss Madsen succeeds in extracting the evidence or whether Mr. Choke succeeds in killing her." Any other person might have felt a chill at the implication, but Chih-Wei understood the cost of the operation before she authorized it. Isidora noted the decision without comment, then said, "I didn't join the compact to be Mikhail's crony." As Isidora spoke, her eyes fixed on the glowing red light with an intensity verging on derangement. "Why did I join the compact? To understand that, you must understand the question that has overshadowed my family, like a sapling beneath a black walnut. Why does a country with nuclear weapons have the right to terrorize countries that do not?" The building rocked as rockets from Freya's extraction team struck the exterior. Chih-Wei heard Freya issuing orders as Choke's accountants went kinetic, and Freya's auditors rapidly built barricades from the innocuous containers they had carried inside. Isidora remained seated, calm as the violence closed in, and continued. "My parents and grandparents were community organizers in the 1950s. They organized votes in rural communities so everyone in Guatemala could have a voice, until the Americans decided they were communists. My grandmother routinely sold whatever material goods we had to help a child get vaccinated or sent to school. But one day she disappeared, and years later, the only record I could find said she died alone of a heart attack." Isidora paused as the sharp staccato of a semi-automatic rifle cracked just outside the conference room, followed by the dull thud of return fire hammering against the bulletproof doors. "I sent my brother, Sebastian, on his first commercial exploration to Iraq at the end of March 2004. He had just graduated from Federico Santa Maria Technical University and was eager to make his name. The Americans called it Operation Vigilant Resolve, but I call it butchery. Isidora's voice dropped into a violent hiss on the last word. He was meeting with a group of elders in Fallujah to negotiate building a smelter when the Americans labeled the gathering a terrorist meeting and destroyed the entire building, which housed a daycare, killing everyone inside. Afterwards, the only part we recovered to bury at Sebastian's funeral was a hand. Isidora stood and said, "You want to know why I support Alexander's fourth wave? I was there the day Mikhail made his 8-year-old son swear an oath before every member of the compact that Alexander would fulfill its promise of justice, no matter the obstacle." She slammed her cane hard against the conference table on the words "promise of justice," then looked at the red light and said quietly, "Even if his father is the obstacle." The room fell silent until Mikhail's voice came over the line and said simply, "Chih-Wei lives." Then the red light winked out. Ron burst into motion the instant the security detail fired at his position. Using Chih-Wei as cover, he fired back, hitting one member of the security detail before taking aim at Isidora. Faced with a no-win scenario, Isidora withdrew from the room with her security detail close behind. Afterwards, Ron urgently motioned for Chih-Wei to follow and said, "Freya almost has the evidence out of the building, so now that the charade is over, we have to go." Freya's voice remained controlled but edged toward harried as she detailed the escape route, finishing with, "At every major intersection, you will hear a sustained burst of fire. Wait for it even if the mesh network loses cohesion inside the building. Climb the C elevator bank to the top, but you will need—" Her voice cut out in a burst of static. Ron, on the verge of frantic, called for clarification. Chih-Wei placed a hand on his shoulder to steady him. She caught his eye and held it. "Remember when we first met? You were my translator in Cobija, and we had to run from criminals out of Brasileia. You used every trick you learned after fleeing Venezuela in the 20s to save us. I knew your character then, and it has only been refined since." Ron closed his eyes for a moment, then recentered himself and said, "The HAP relay was taken out, but we might be able to re-establish a direct device connection by the third intersection, where the corridor runs close to a set of windows." Chih-Wei followed 3 steps behind Ron. They had developed a close, wordless coordination, and she did not need prompting to know he would check the corner before moving. Ron raised a slender, maneuverable camera and held it steady. The length of the scan told her there was an obstacle ahead. When he swapped magazines for non-lethal neurotoxin pellets, she understood he was preparing for a quiet takedown. He fired 4 times in quick succession. As she followed, she instinctively gauged the dosage based on the man's size. Chih-Wei helped Ron roll over one of Isidora's security men to make sure his airway was unobstructed, but she stepped back in surprise as his eyes fixed accusingly on her. "He interviewed to join my team. He was so proud that his son would continue the family's success," Chih-Wei thought to herself. As Ron moved toward the next intersection, Chih-Wei shook herself mentally free and followed. Ahead they came upon a pitched battle between Choque's accountants and Madsen's auditors. Ron pressed her against the wall as one of the accountants kicked away a grenade thrown by the auditors, sending it bouncing unluckily around the corner. Ron grinned silently and tapped his chest to show that his body armor had taken the brunt of the blast. But Chih-Wei was already wrapping his leg with a fast-acting coagulant bandage, while his brain still failed to register the deep groove torn along his thigh. The pain caught up quickly, and his weight sagged against her. He bent close and whispered, "You will have to take the lead. To cross, take a small gray square from my inner jacket pocket. There's a lip to open the package." He guided her hand to his jacket. "When you hear the next sustained burst of gunfire, rip it open and throw it into the intersection. Smoke will fill the space, and we will only have a few moments to cross." Chih-Wei nodded in understanding. The moment she heard the next sustained burst of gunfire, she followed the plan. As the smoke spread through the intersection, Ron and Chih-Wei crossed as swiftly and quietly as they could manage. The next intersection was clear, and as they approached the windows, they heard Freya call out, "Gone Mother and Cachapa! Do you hear me? Over!" Dragon Mother, and Chih-Wei and Ron smiled in relief as Ron cut in. Ice Queen, we hear you. What's going on with the elevators? Freya laughed with evident relief. We filled them with smoke. At the bottom of the shaft is Hollywood fire. The smoke will be dark black, but the realistic-looking flames will keep most people away. Ron's face fell as he looked down at his blood-soaked leg. Is there another way? Freya answered. Negative. She let the silence linger before adding brightly, concerned about the smoke? That's why I hid rebreathers in the fire equipment compartment near the elevators. Chih-Wei smiled as Ron answered her with some of the vilest words in the Spanish language. With Freya knowing where Ron and Chih-Wei were positioned, she expertly drew Isidora's team away from them. As they put on the rebreathers and shouldered their oxygen tanks, Chih-Wei tied a length of rope around Ron's shoulders and fashioned a makeshift harness around herself. She paused long enough to settle into a slow, rhythmic breathing pattern, then began climbing the elevator shaft. The smoke was incredibly thick and at times disorienting, so she closed her eyes and focused on each step and pull. At times, the harness pulled tight as Ron faltered, but she responded without comment, drawing him upward with steady, insistent pressure, just enough to steady him. As Chih-Wei climbed through the access panel onto the roof, she braced herself against the wall and kept just enough tension on the rope to help Ron make the final climb. They found the parachutes where Freya said they would be, but Chih-Wei knew they were trapped the moment Ron assessed each side of the roof. Any safe sides? She asked futilely. Ron simply shook his head. Before Chih-Wei could react, Ron called Luis on an open channel. Luis, you heard Mikhail's decision. Chih-Wei imagined Luis's grim smile as he replied, Chih-Wei lives, but he didn't say anything about you, my friend. Chih-Wei knew what Ron intended to do, so she commanded him, Give me your jacket and tie. They both knew it was reckless for her to risk her life for his, but she pleaded anyway. Promise me you will at least give yourself a chance. Her voice broke at the end as she masked her gender with a helmet, Ron's jacket, and his tie, while Ron's demeanor remained neutral as he nodded and put on his own helmet. They stood for a moment at the roof's edge before base jumping when Chih-Wei was horrified to see that Ron had ripped open his shirt. Ron smiled at her before jumping, tears streaking his face as he mouthed the word, live. She turned away, eyes burning, unable to watch the consequences of her choice. Freya's team respectfully covered Ron's body as they withdrew from Isidora's compound, but Chih-Wei only numbly went through the mechanics, while safely inside Freya's security cordon. She eventually stepped into her executive pod aboard her customized plane, which was hot and primed for a fast departure, and it leapt into the air, skimming just above the ocean while heading straight west to use the Earth's curvature as cover from Isidora's ground-based radar. However, the low-altitude skimming plan had been anticipated, and the pilots were unable to react fast enough when a waiting man-pad was fired. The executive pod was designed to protect in the event of a catastrophic aviation failure, but it required a minimum altitude to function properly, and they were too low. The pod ejected from the main body of the plane, then smashed into the ocean. The shock absorption provided some protection, but Chih-Wei barely survived the impact. Somewhere in the Pacific. 2046. Father, why did Mother give me a boy's name? Chih-Wei was 6, and her father was driving her home early from school, after she had been dismissed for beating 2 boys who teased her for having a boy's name. He edged the car along Zhongshan Road as scooters flooded the intersections near the Love River and city buses forced their way out from their stops without waiting. She watched her father suddenly go still, his hair already unusually white for a man so young. Chih-Wei was about to repeat her question when her father asked, What does Chih-Wei mean? Having been teased for most of her life over the meaning of her name, she answered quickly, Great ambition. Her father nodded and said, Can a woman have great ambition? The name a mother chooses for her children often carries both consequence and hope. Your mother had a difficult life, and she longed to have a daughter she could give the life she always wanted for herself. A life with great ambition where you could choose whatever you wanted. knowing you were fearfully and wonderfully made. Chih-Wei felt warmth fill her heart, partly because her father rarely spoke of her mother, who had died during childbirth, but also because of a growing determination to make the world understand that great ambition is not a boy's name. The warmth fractured, and she woke strapped tightly to a gurney. Her body felt completely numb, yet broken at the same time. She sensed a presence nearby, but maddeningly could not turn her head, so she rasped, "Is that you, Freya?" Ole Sidorov's voice was quiet, but boomed all the same, because Chih-Wei knew exactly what it meant if he was beside her. "I warned you never to allow yourself to fall into my control." Her heart raced like a trapped hare as she slipped back into unconsciousness. Chih-Wei began to relive the memory that followed the Zurich pitch. She called her father when she saw the news that China's hardliners' failed invasion of Taiwan was followed by genocidal urban destruction. Her father's voice sounded broken. The plan worked. Even the autonomous drones, the hidden deep-sea mines, and the orbital weapons all worked perfectly. Chih-Wei could hear panicked voices as people learned about the latest atrocity. Every amphibious ship and several carriers were destroyed, but the sword's edge cuts both ways as Beijing learned from the Russians and Iranians the limitations of Western air defense. Chih-Wei's beloved father sounded despondent and broken. The plan was that we would publicly repudiate one country, two systems, which would trigger the insane hardliners to call for invasion. The party leaders we had been back-channeling with said it would be like lancing a boil, but they must have been too weak to seize power from the hardliners. For the first time in her life, Chih-Wei heard genuine panic in her father's voice. "We are being exterminated, and it isn't even on the news." After decades of American brutality during the War on Terror, followed by Russia's unpunished destruction of entire cities in Syria and Ukraine, restraint ceased to matter. The Chinese hardliners took the lesson to heart. Hospitals, maternity wards, and schools were deliberately targeted to maximize casualties. The Europeans say they will place the matter on next month's United Nations Security Council agenda to discuss restraint. Her father, renowned for his poetry on reconciliation and forgiveness, let out a bitter snort. In the background, she could hear a general solemnly reciting, "Pifu yinu, shuejian wubu, tianxia, gaosu." Her father repeated the words with the gathered military leaders, then whispered, "I have lost control." The generals have decided that something must be done in retaliation, so they are going to strike the toxic rare earth byproduct pools that will contaminate the headwaters of the Yangtze and Yellow Rivers for a generation. "Listen, Chih-Wei, I am going to die." Chih-Wei burst into tears when her father finally gave voice to her dread. He made soft, instinctive sounds meant to comfort her, but then cut in again because time was short. "I need you to hear this. I am part of a group committed to bringing justice to this world, freed from the tyranny and terrorism of nuclear weapons. I am going to tell you my last poem, and only one other person in the world knows these words." Her father articulated each line slowly, his voice thick with desperation. "You must trust them when they recite this poem. On Alishan, dawn comes softly. Tea leaves turn toward the sun. Lanterns drift across the harbor, and the shore remembers peace. Rain washes the night market clean. Bamboo rises through broken stone. At one table, 2 bowls of soup, their distinct scents blending together. We are an island, yet butterflies cross the ocean, fragile wings held steady by unseen strength. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is turning toward the sun, lotus blossoms rising through silt, insistent, steady toward the light." Chih-Wei, mumbling her father's poem, woke strapped to a gurney and drenched in sweat. Her broken body relaxed as she remembered her father and how he had always hoped she would carry his belief that their two countries could be reconciled, stronger together as true co-equals. Then the pain snapped back, and she slipped into a darker memory of a dim basement in Amman. She struggled against reliving her final National Security Bureau briefing. Her handler called himself Chen Kuoming, but it was a lie that no longer mattered. He had once been heavily muscled, but now stood with a paunch, wearing a jumper stretched too tightly across his frame. His hands rested on the wooden table as he leaned toward her. "You have been successful," he said, "close enough to Mikhail Mirov that we can finally see what he was doing. You have seen the proof that he deceived both your father and the hardliners in Beijing. When she was in college training to join the NSB, she had feared and respected the stone-cold man. Now she was shocked to see tears forming in his eyes as he continued. Mikhail Mirov caused the war of extermination so he could shift the semiconductor supply chain out of East Asia and into East Africa, placing it under his control." Kuoming panted with anger before grimly sliding an envelope across the table after regaining his composure. "You were trained for this, so you know how the neurotoxin works." Chih-Wei remembered the emotions warring inside her as she balanced the desire to kill the man responsible for her father's death against the certainty that she had a better plan for his downfall. She stood, leaving the envelope untouched, and said, "You already know my decision. You rejected my plan, but that does not mean I have to follow yours. You want to kill the man, but I will destroy his dream," she thought to herself. Author's note: this novel began as a response to two troubling global trends. The first is the growing comfort with nuclear appeasement. The second is the steady rise of global political violence. Through this story, I wanted to explore the dangers of both while offering a possible path forward through the idea of the Charter, a political framework built to redefine what a state can be. This book is the first in a planned 9-part series. The first trilogy begins in a near-future world, grounded in realism and science, and its later volumes move beyond Earth to the cloud cities of Venus and the scavenger worlds of dead civilizations, where technology has become indistinguishable from magic. The second trilogy carries these ideas into a fantasy realm. The third trilogy unites both universes into one. The Charter and its principles form the through line of the entire series, expressed in its central creed: every life is sovereign. If you have listened this far, thank you. Please consider liking or subscribing to help this story and its message reach more people.